What do you think of my rock star hair? Yeah, I like it. Thanks, Glenn. It's looking pretty good. Hi, James Elliott here. My pronouns are he/him. I have so much to tell you. Firstly, I had my top surgery. Oh my gosh, you guys. Look at me. I mean, I'm just gonna stand up real quick and show you. I can do all this stuff now without my boobs getting in the way. It's amazing. It's so liberating. Worry-free. Just the euphoria every time I look down and all I see is my belly. I never would have thought that looking at my chubby tummy would make me so happy, but it does. And now that I've had several weeks of recovery to let it all sink in, I'm finally ready to tell you the story of all the delays that happened before the surgery. So, about a month ago, I posted to everyone that my surgery was about to happen, and it was supposed to. I already had the go-ahead from my surgeon. She already told me that we didn't need any special authorization from the insurance company because she was billing it under the category of pain management and not under the gender dysphoria category. And I was being sent to the hospital for my pre-surgical testing, where I was to be given a wristband that had my blood type on it so that if I needed a transfusion during my surgery, they would know which blood type I was. I was only 3 days away from my day, but there was this one person. She was the one who checked me in. When I saw her, she rolled her eyes and then looked down at the computer as if to say, "Oh, one of those." I tried not to let it get me down. I told her that my name was James and that I was here for pre-surgical testing. She looked at her computer and then my ID and then said, "Your ID says your name is Jennifer, so we need to just use your legal name." And the way she said it, so nonchalant, just got me upset. So I told her, just to be polite, that I understood that my legal name was Jennifer, but my preferred name was just James, and that was all I was talking about. And I reassured her that I was only going to use the name Jennifer for all of my legal paperwork and documents. Every single one of the other nurses that day were all the sweetest, kindest people. They all called me by my preferred name and pronouns, and then I went home to await my surgery. Now, the day of my surgery, I had been preparing for 3 days with pre-surgical wash twice a day, and I changed my bed sheets like they instructed, and I fasted after midnight the night before, and I had Matt come home from work early so he could drive me this morning of my surgery. We got all the way to the hospital to find out that all of the procedures for surgeries were canceled that day due to a broken piece of equipment. They had called all of the patients who were on the roster, but I wasn't even on the roster that day. It turns out that first woman that I had come into contact with had opened up an authorization on me when she signed me into the portal system. I only know it was her because my surgeon eventually ended up filing a complaint against her after the fact. They had to track which computer the original authorization for my surgery was started on, and it was the same tablet that my original portal paperwork was signed on that she handed me to sign when I first walked in the front door. So that first date of my surgery ended up being a bust. And then we were given another date just 4 days later. My surgeon and I were both told by the insurance company that they could put a rush on the authorization and we could be in business by early the next week. So my surgeon set the date, and I continued to wear my pre-surgical wristband, and I continued to wash twice a day with special antimicrobial soap, And also, I couldn't go anywhere because I was having surgery in a few days. And then the day before my surgery, it was almost here. This time, I was skeptical. I called the insurance company and I asked. I said, "Did my authorization go through for my surgery?" And they said, "Yes." And then I called the hospital and they said, "Go ahead and be here on time. Make sure you haven't eaten anything after midnight." So I washed my bed sheets again and fasted after midnight again. And then I got a phone call from my surgeon. And it turned out that not only did that woman start an authorization that she wasn't supposed to start, but she started an authorization with a code that was completely wrong. She had run the code for a partial mastectomy. This is the code for only one breast instead of two. If my surgeon was to use this code and continue with the surgery, she would have been forced to choose only one breast to take and have to leave the other one for another time. If that's not sabotage, I don't know what is. So at this point, my surgeon was forced to put my surgery on hold until further notice, until we could get that code changed. So they had to fax new paperwork to the insurance company, and also at this time is when they filed the complaint against that woman. Even though they were able to put a rush on getting the original authorization to go through, it turns out that when you're actually trying to change an original code, you aren't able to put a rush on that. So it took a full 10 days to 2 weeks for this process to take place. During this process of waiting, I went through a little bit of a PTSD setback. I started to feel afraid to even go back to the hospital ever again. I started to revert to using my dead name whenever I was talking to medical professionals. I felt like I'd been forced back into my pretending mode. I wrote this. It's one of my journal entries. That nurse broke me. I tried to use my chosen name, but she refused to let me, and she made it so that I knew my place. I will never try to get her to use my chosen name again. I know better. Now, if I don't want my surgery pushed back another month, I best just sign my dead name and keep pretending like the good little girl they want me to be. And then after my breasts have been removed, then maybe I can stop pretending again. But for now, I have to pretend, because I can't risk her even recognizing me the day I go in to redo my pre-surgical testing. I can't risk her remembering that I was the same one that had their doctor file a complaint on her. I don't want her to try and sabotage my surgery again. This whole ordeal has me broken. I remember my therapy session, the day that I wrote that particular journal entry. My therapist told me that the statement that I wrote, where I said I was broken, was extremely powerful. Number one, it took a lot for me to admit out loud that I was feeling broken. But it was also very strong for me to be able to come to her and talk about my vulnerability. So in the moment where I was feeling broken, I was also building myself back up at the same time. We went over some techniques for centering my thoughts, and I learned about belly breathing too. This has helped me a lot. I've used this whenever I needed a way to just take myself out of a situation and focus on something else for a minute. And I'm just going to talk about belly breathing for a second. I'm taking myself away from the script for a second, so if you hear me sort of talk a little bit differently, it's because I've got dyspraxia, and it's hard for me to talk off script, so bear with me here. Belly breathing is something where you don't breathe through your lungs per se. You breathe with your lungs, but you breathe with other parts of your body. You want to take the breath into your belly, and you want to feel it in your belly. So you take it in, and you feel your belly rise. So you go, and you feel your belly rise with each of your breaths. It takes a lot of concentration, so it actually takes you out of the moment, and you feel it in your belly. Anyway, this is something that I've done a lot since then, and it sort of helps me to take myself out of the moment for a minute, think about my breathing, think about something other than what's making me feel nervous, making me feel like I'm not able to focus, and just think about my breathing for a little while. Thankfully, after the 2 weeks were up, the day of my 3 times rescheduled surgery finally came, and I went to the hospital, and after several therapy sessions, I was prepared to face her. She seemed different this time, like maybe she had been spoken to, and she didn't want to get into trouble. But I still had that PTSD lump in the back of my throat. I focused on my breathing. I handed her my ID and told her that I have a double mastectomy today. And she looked at her computer and then looked back at me. And she seemed to remember that I preferred another name. She said, "I can write your preferred name on your paperwork for you if you like." I said, "Yes, it's James, thank you." And we didn't say anything else. She definitely had been spoken to by a supervisor. After that, I'm going to be honest, the rest of the day is pretty hazy, probably because of all the sedation. But I can say that after I woke up, I just remembered looking down and seeing my belly instead of my boobs for the first time. And that was the best feeling ever. I was in and out of consciousness for several hours after that. And then I was in my room. And for a couple of days, I was learning how to get up and walk to the bathroom and just scooch myself up in the bed to feed myself. I had some nice nurses and some not so nice nurses. But overall, my experience was a positive one. I waited until after my tubes were removed and my surgical binder no longer needed to be worn before recording this because my mobility has been extremely restricted by the tubes. And now that they are out, I can shower easier, I can breathe easier, and I can even talk easier. I just feel more like myself. I'm back, baby. The only downside to all of the delays is that I originally had planned on having an early summer surgery, so I could have been recouped by now and looking for work. But I'm still not completely finished with my surgery yet. There's still a follow-up surgery that I need to have to get the rest of the breast tissue that was missed out of my armpits, and my doctor's going to do this as an outpatient procedure here in the next few weeks. Then I will have several more weeks of recovery time. And then I will be looking for work, after school's already been in full swing. But it is what it is. Serenity is learning to accept the things we cannot change, and I can't go back in time and have my surgery earlier. Besides, who knows what crazy things might have happened if my surgery would have happened back then. You never know. I'm just so happy that I even had my surgery, and every day I wake up and I look at myself and I'm grateful for my surgeon. Dr. Castilla is so wonderful to have listened to me when I came to her. She heard my cries when I begged her, and I told her about my history of all the years that I was suffering with lumps in my breasts that were aching, and the weight that was pulling down on my shoulders and my neck and back, and the fact that it was just so much of a burden to me. She listened to me, and she actually did something about it, and I'm so grateful. Until next time, let's all strive for the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thanks.